When an ordinary accountant accidentally bonds with a stranded alien empress, he discovers Earth's fate rests not in the hands of heroes, but in his. David woke up with the kind of headache that makes you question every decision you've ever made. His mouth felt like sandpaper, and when he tried to open his eyes, the morning light stabbed through his skull like tiny needles. He groaned and rolled over, fully prepared to spend the next hour feeling sorry for himself. That's when he saw her. A woman was sitting at the edge of his bed. Not standing in the doorway, not wandering around his apartment. Sitting right there close enough to touch like it was the most normal thing in the world. David's brain short-circuited. He blinked hard, hoping she was some kind of sleep-deprived hallucination. But when he opened his eyes again, she was still there. Only now he could see her properly, and what he saw made absolutely no sense. Her skin wasn't quite right. It had this shimmer to it like oil on water, shifting between silver and deep purple whenever she moved. And her eyes, they were the really weird part. They were larger than normal human eyes, and inside them, he could swear he saw tiny lights moving around, like someone had captured a piece of the night sky and put it where her irises should be. "Good morning," she said, and her voice sounded like wind chimes mixed with music he'd never heard before. "I hope you slept well." David did what any reasonable person would do in that situation. He scrambled backward so fast he nearly fell off the other side of the bed. His back slammed against the headboard and he pulled the blanket up like it could somehow protect him from whatever was happening. "Who are you?" he managed to croak out. "How did you get in here? What do you want?" The woman tilted her head, studying him with those impossible eyes. She didn't look threatening exactly, more like confused, like she was trying to figure out a puzzle that didn't make sense. "You claimed me last night, human," she said softly. And there was something in her voice that sounded almost like surprise. "Do you not remember? Claimed you? I don't even know you." David's heart was hammering so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Look, if this is some kind of prank, it's not funny. If someone paid you to do this, this is no prank." She stood up then, and David got his first good look at what she was wearing. It wasn't clothes, not really. It looked more like she was draped in starlight itself, this flowing material that seemed to glow from within. "My name is Zylara. I am the Empress of the constellation Throne, ruler of 7 star systems. And as of last night, according to the ancient laws of my people, you are my bonded consort." David stared at her. Then he looked around his tiny apartment with its cheap furniture and yesterday's takeout containers still on the coffee table. Then he looked back at her. "I think you have the wrong guy," he said. But even as he said it, something was nagging at the back of his mind. Fragments of memory, foggy and unclear like remembering a dream. He'd gone to the park last night, hadn't he? There was supposed to be a meteor shower, one of those once-in-a-lifetime things, and he'd gone to see it because, well, he had nothing better to do on a Tuesday night. He remembered the meteors. Bright streaks across the sky, beautiful. But then there was something else, something that didn't fall like a meteor should fall. It had moved strangely, zigzagging through the air, and then it had crashed somewhere in the park. David had walked toward it. He remembered that now. Everyone else was running away, screaming, pulling out their phones to call 911. But something had pulled him forward. Some curiosity he couldn't explain. There had been light. Purple light so bright it hurt to look at. And in the middle of that light, something that looked like a stone, smooth and perfect, pulsing with energy. He'd reached out and touched it. The memory ended there. Everything after that was blank until waking up in his bed just now. "The claiming stone," Zylara said, watching his face change as the memories came back. "You touched it. When my ship was damaged and I crashed on your world, the stone activated its emergency protocol. It bonds me to the first being who touches it, ensuring I have a protector while I am vulnerable." She moved closer, and David could feel something strange in the air around her, like static electricity but warmer. "I did not intend for this to happen," she continued, and for the first time she sounded almost apologetic. "I was being pursued. My ship was failing. I had no choice but to land here. And you were the one who found me." David's practical mind was trying desperately to make sense of all this. "Okay, let's say I believe you. Which I'm not saying I do. But let's say you're really an alien empress or whatever. Can't you just, I don't know, unclaim me? Take back the bond thing?" Zylara's expression shifted to something that might have been regret. "The claiming cannot be undone easily. It requires a ritual, performed at a specific time. The next opportunity is during the lunar eclipse 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks? David's voice cracked. Until then we are bound. I cannot be more than a short distance from you. If we are separated, we both will suffer. The bond connects our life forces. What affects you affects me. What affects me affects you. David dropped his head into his hands. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. He was an accountant, for crying out loud. His biggest adventure in the last year was trying a new Thai restaurant. Alien empresses and magical bonding rituals were not part of his life plan. You're telling me, he said slowly, that I'm stuck with you for 3 weeks? That you're going to follow me everywhere? What am I supposed to tell people? What am I supposed to tell my boss? You should tell them whatever keeps them from asking too many questions, Zylara said. Because whether you believe me or not, the situation is far more serious than you understand. She raised her arm, and a device on her wrist lit up. Suddenly, the air in front of them shimmered, and David was looking at what appeared to be a 3-dimensional display. Images floated in the space between them, showing things that made his blood run cold. Earth seen from space. But it wasn't the beautiful blue marble he'd seen in photos. Dark tendrils of something that looked like smoke or shadow were wrapped around the planet, pulsing slowly like veins carrying poison. What is that? David whispered. That, Zylara said grimly, is why I was coming to your world in the first place. Your planet is being infected by something we call the Void Collective. It is an ancient entity that feeds on civilizations by consuming their hatred, their anger, their despair. It has been seeding your world for decades, making your conflicts worse, driving your people apart, preparing Earth for the final harvest. David wanted to laugh. This was too much. Too big, too impossible. But the images floating in front of him looked terrifyingly real. And when he looked into Zylara's eyes, he saw something that made him stop doubting. He saw fear. An empress who could cross the stars, who ruled entire worlds, was afraid. And if she was afraid, then maybe, just maybe, he should be too. Why me? He asked quietly. Out of everyone on this planet, why did it have to be me? Zylara looked at him for a long moment. I have been asking myself the same question, she admitted. But perhaps the universe knows something we do not. You were the one brave enough to approach the unknown when others ran. That courage may be exactly what we need. She held out her hand to him. I did not choose this bond, David, and neither did you. But it is real, and it is done. Your world is in danger, and I am far from my empire, stranded and vulnerable. We need each other, whether we like it or not. David looked at her outstretched hand. His whole life, he'd played it safe. Studied hard, got a stable job, kept his head down. Part of him wanted to pull the covers over his head and pretend none of this was happening. But another part of him, a part he'd almost forgotten existed, felt something stirring. A sense that maybe, just maybe, he'd been waiting his whole life for something extraordinary to happen. He took her hand. The moment their skin touched, he felt it. A warmth that spread through his entire body, like something inside him was waking up after a long sleep. He could feel her presence in his mind, not reading his thoughts exactly, but there. Connected. So what happens now? He asked. Zylara gave him a small smile, the first genuine expression he'd seen on her face. Now I tell you everything, and then we decide how an empress without an army and a human accountant are going to save your world. David called in sick to work. What else could he do? He could hardly tell his manager that an alien empress was sitting in his living room explaining the secret history of Earth. So he made up something about food poisoning and spent the next several hours learning that everything he thought he knew about the world was wrong. Zylara didn't waste time with gentle explanations. She showed him everything through the device on her wrist, projecting images and data that made his head spin, maps of star systems he'd never imagined, records of civilizations that had risen and fallen while humans were still figuring out fire. And the Void Collective, present in every story, like a cancer spreading through the galaxy. Think of them as parasites, Zylara explained, pacing his small apartment like a caged tiger. But instead of feeding on bodies, they feed on emotions. Negative emotions specifically. Fear, hatred, anger, despair. The more a civilization produces these feelings, the stronger the collective becomes. David was sitting on his couch trying to process this. So they're like, what, emotion vampires from space? That's not entirely inaccurate, Zylara said. She paused her pacing to look at him. They find a world with intelligent life and they begin to influence it. Small things at first. A misunderstanding here, a conflict there. They amplify the worst parts of a species' nature. Over time, the civilization tears itself apart, drowning in its own negativity, and the collective feeds on all of it. She brought up another image, Earth again, but this time David could see the dark tendrils in more detail. They seemed to cluster around certain areas, cities, government buildings, anywhere people gathered. Your world has been infected for almost 70 years now, Xylara continued. The collective arrived after your second global war. They saw how much hatred and violence humans were capable of producing, and they decided Earth would make an excellent meal. Wait, David interrupted, his mind racing. Are you saying that all the bad stuff happening in the world, the wars and the hatred and everything, that's because of these things? Not all of it, Xylara said, and her tone was carefully neutral. Humans are perfectly capable of cruelty and violence on their own, but the collective amplifies it. They make disagreements into feuds. They turn fear into rage. They find the cracks in your society and they widen them, pushing people further and further apart. David felt sick. How long do we have? Before they, harvest us or whatever? Not long. Xylara's expression was grim. My people detected the increase in collective activity around Earth 6 months ago. That's why I was sent here, to warn your leaders and help organize a defense. But the collective knew I was coming. They sabotaged my ship. They wanted to make sure no one could interfere with their plans. She sat down beside him on the couch, and David noticed how tired she looked. For someone who claimed to be an all-powerful empress, she seemed exhausted. I should have been more careful, she said quietly. I should have anticipated their attack. But I was arrogant. I thought my ship's defenses were strong enough. I was wrong. And now I'm stranded here with no way to contact my fleet, no way to warn anyone. All I have is the claiming stone and you. David looked at her, really looked at her. Behind the otherworldly appearance and the regal bearing, she was just someone trying to do the right thing and failing. He understood that feeling. So what do we do, he asked. If your ship crashed, there must be pieces of it, right? Can we use those? Xylara's eyes widened slightly. You would help me. Even knowing the danger? You said we're bonded now, right? Your problems are my problems. David managed a weak smile. Besides, it's my planet these things are trying to eat. I've got a vested interest in stopping them. For the first time since he'd met her, Xylara looked at him with something like respect. Yes, she said. There are fragments of my ship scattered across your city. They contain technology that could help us fight the collective. But they also contain weapons and systems that the collective will want to use against humanity. We have to find them first. Over the next 2 days, David's life became something out of a movie he'd never have believed. Xylara taught him how to sense the ship fragments through their bond. It felt like having a new sense he'd never used before, like suddenly being able to hear a frequency that had always been there but invisible. They found the first fragment in an old warehouse district. It was small, about the size of a basketball, and it glowed with that same purple light he remembered from the park. When David touched it, he felt energy surge through him, information flooding into his mind, star charts, mathematical formulas, languages he'd never heard but somehow understood. This is incredible, he breathed, staring at his hands. They were tingling with power. This is dangerous, Xylara corrected. The bond between us is adapting faster than I expected. You're absorbing knowledge and abilities that should take months to develop. Your body isn't ready for this. But even as she said it, David could feel it. The connection between them was growing stronger. He could sense her emotions now, feel her determination and her fear, and she could feel his confusion, his excitement, his stubborn refusal to give up even when everything seemed impossible. They weren't alone in searching for the fragments, though. That's when they discovered the thralls. The first time David saw one, he thought it was just a normal person, a man in a business suit walking toward them on the street. But Xylara grabbed his arm, her grip tight. Don't look into his eyes, she warned. David looked anyway. He couldn't help it. And what he saw made his stomach turn. The man's eyes were wrong. They were too dark, and in that darkness something moved. Something oily and ancient and hungry. Thralls, Xylara whispered. Humans who have been taken over by the collective. They're puppets now, controlled by the entity. And they're here for the fragment. What happened next was a blur. The thrall attacked, moving faster than any human should move. More of them appeared from nowhere, surrounding them. David panicked, his heart racing, and then something inside him clicked. Power flooded through him, coming from his bond with Xylara. His body moved on instinct, dodging attacks he shouldn't have been able to see coming. Light erupted from his hands, the same purple energy from the fragment, and it sent one of the thralls flying backward. Xylara fought beside him, her movements graceful and deadly. Together they drove the thralls back, securing the fragment and escaping into the maze of alleys behind the warehouse. Later, safe in David's apartment, they both sat in stunned silence. "What was that?" David asked, staring at his hands. "What did I just do?" "The claiming," Xylara said slowly, "is more powerful than I realized. You channeled energy through our bond. That should be impossible for a human. Your physiology isn't designed for it. But I did it anyway." "Yes." She looked at him with a mixture of concern and wonder, which means either you're far more adaptable than any human I've encountered, or our bond is far stronger than it should be. Possibly both. David felt the weight of it settling on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him anymore. It wasn't even just about Earth. He was connected to something vast and cosmic, and he had no idea where it would lead. "We need help," he said finally. "We can't do this alone. There are more fragments out there and more thralls. We need people we can trust." Xylara nodded. "I agree. But who can we trust? The collective has been here for decades. They could have thralls anywhere. In your government, your military, your media, we need to be careful." "I know someone," David said, an idea forming. "Someone who's been researching weird energy patterns for years. She's a physicist. If anyone would believe us and help us, it's her. That's how they met Dr. Lisa Chen. She was the kind of person who had NASA posters on her office walls and still got excited about meteor showers like a kid. When David showed up at her lab with Xylara, he'd never seen someone go through so many emotions so fast. First, shock, then denial, then fascination. By the time Xylara had explained everything and shown her the fragment, Lisa was practically vibrating with excitement. "This is real," she kept saying, examining the fragment with instruments that beeped and whirred. "This is actually real. Do you know what this means? Do you know what we could learn from this?" "We don't have time for research," Xylara said firmly. "We need your help to find the other fragments and keep them away from the collective." Lisa looked up, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "The collective. These things that are infecting Earth. How do we stop them?" "We need to gather all the fragments," Xylara explained. "My ship's core contains a weapon that can purge their influence from the planet. But we have to activate it during the lunar eclipse, when the barriers between dimensions are thinnest. That gives us exactly 19 days. Lisa whistled low. "No pressure then." But despite her casual tone, David could see the determination in her eyes. She'd spent her whole career being called crazy for believing in extraterrestrial life. Now that she had proof, nothing was going to stop her from helping. They spent the next week hunting fragments. Lisa's equipment helped them track the energy signatures. David's growing connection to Xylara helped them sense where the pieces had fallen, and slowly, carefully, they built up their collection. But with each fragment they found, the attacks got worse. More thralls appeared, more organized, more dangerous. It became clear that the collective knew we. The fifth fragment led them to someone unexpected. They'd tracked the energy signature to a rough part of town, an area where most people didn't go after dark. David was nervous, but Xylara moved through the streets like she owned them, her otherworldly presence making would-be troublemakers think twice. They found the fragment in an abandoned apartment building. And they found someone guarding it. His name was Ryan, and he was a veteran who'd seen things he couldn't explain. When his unit had been deployed overseas 5 years ago, they'd encountered something that didn't make sense. An attack that came from nowhere, soldiers moving like puppets, eyes dark and empty. Most of his unit hadn't made it back. Ryan had spent years trying to understand what he'd seen. The military had called it enemy combatants. His therapist had called it trauma. But Ryan knew better. He'd seen the darkness in those eyes, and he'd been looking for answers ever since. When he found the fragment 2 days ago, it had called to him somehow. He'd taken it, hidden it, started researching, and then David and Xylara showed up. "I knew it," Ryan said when Xylara explained about the collective. His hands were shaking, but his voice was steady. "I knew what I saw was real. They were thralls, weren't they? The soldiers who attacked us." "Yes," Xylara said gently. "The collective has been testing its control over humans for years. Military personnel make strong thralls because of their training." Ryan sat down hard, processing this. Then he looked up at them with fierce determination. "How do I help?" Whatever you're doing to fight these things, I want in. That's how their team started to grow. Ryan knew tactics, weapons, strategy. He started training David in basic combat, teaching him how to move, how to think in a fight. And through the bond, Zilara could enhance David's abilities, making him faster and stronger than he'd ever been. The next person they found was completely different. Tommy was 18, a computer genius who'd dropped out of college because he found it boring. He spent his time in internet cafes hacking systems for fun until he noticed something strange: patterns in the data. Coordinated disinformation campaigns spreading across social media. Messages designed to make people angry, to divide them, to push them toward hatred. Tommy had been tracking these patterns for months, trying to figure out who was behind them. When Lisa brought him into the group and showed him what they were dealing with, his eyes went wide. "This explains everything," he said, his fingers flying over his keyboard. "Look, I can show you the data streams. The collective is using digital infrastructure to spread their influence. They're weaponizing social media, news sites, everything, making people hate each other without even realizing they're being manipulated." He pulled up charts and graphs that made David's head hurt. "See this spike? That's when a major political argument happened online. And this one? That's when those protests turned into riots. Every major conflict in the last 5 years has these same patterns underneath. Someone or something has been orchestrating all of it." "Can you stop it?" Zilara asked. Tommy cracked his knuckles. "I can try. If I can trace the source code, find where the collective is injecting its influence into the systems, maybe I can block it. Or at least slow it down." They worked together, this unlikely team. Lisa tracked fragments with her scientific equipment. Ryan taught them how to fight. Tommy monitored the collective's digital presence. And David, well, David was becoming something he'd never expected. Each time they recovered a fragment, his connection to Zilara deepened. He could feel her thoughts now, not reading her mind exactly, but understanding her on a level that went beyond words. He knew when she was tired, when she was worried, when she was remembering the world she'd failed to save before Earth. And she could feel him too, his determination, his growing confidence, his fear that he wasn't good enough for this. One night, after a particularly difficult fight with thralls, she found him sitting alone on the roof of his apartment building, staring at the stars. "You're doubting yourself," she said, sitting beside him. "I'm an accountant, Zilara. A week ago, my biggest problem was a client who couldn't keep track of receipts. Now I'm supposed to help save the world from cosmic parasites. How is that supposed to work?" "By doing exactly what you've been doing," she said firmly. "Do you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who ran toward danger when everyone else ran away. Someone who didn't give up when I told him his world was ending. Someone who fought thralls without any training because his friends needed him." She turned to face him fully. "You think you're ordinary, David, but I've seen 1,000 worlds, met countless beings. Bravery isn't about having power or training. It's about choosing to stand up when you'd rather hide, and you do that every single day." David felt warmth spread through him, not from the bond, but from something simpler. "You're not what I expected either," he admitted. "When you first appeared, I thought you'd be all cold and imperial. But you care, about Earth, about the people we've met, about me." Zilara smiled, and in that moment she looked less like an empress and more like a woman far from home. Perhaps we're both surprising each other. The moment was interrupted by Tommy's frantic call. He'd found something in the data, a pattern that suggested the collective was planning something big. "It's centered on Nexus Tower," Tommy said when they all gathered at Lisa's lab. "That's the tallest building in the city. And according to these energy readings, something is there. Something huge." Lisa confirmed it with her equipment. "He's right. There's a massive energy signature at the top of that building. If I had to guess, I'd say that's where the final fragment is. Your ship's core." "Of course," Zilara said grimly. "The collective would want to control it. With the power core, they could accelerate the harvest, drain Earth in days instead of weeks." Ryan was already planning. Nexus Tower is privately owned by some tech billionaire. 60 floors, heavy security, probably cameras everywhere. If the collective controls it, the whole building could be full of thralls. "We don't have a choice," David said. "We need that core to activate the weapon. The eclipse is in 8 days. We have to go in and get it." But they all knew this was different from the other fragments. This wasn't a quick grab and run. This was an assault on enemy territory, and the collective would throw everything they had at stopping them. Over the next week, they prepared. Ryan drilled them on tactics. Tommy hacked into the building's systems, mapping out security. Lisa modified some of the alien technology from the fragments, creating weapons that could disrupt the collective's energy. And David trained with Zylara, learning to channel more power through their bond. It was getting easier now, like the connection between them was a muscle he was learning to use. He could call on her energy in battle, and she could use his emotional strength to push past her own limits. But there was a cost. The more they used the bond, the more intertwined they became. David found himself dreaming her memories, seeing the worlds she'd saved and the ones she'd lost. And Zylara felt his life, his years of quiet loneliness, his longing for something more. They were becoming more than just bonded partners. They were becoming something neither of them had quite expected. 3 days before the eclipse, they made their final preparations. The team gathered in Lisa's lab, checking equipment, going over the plan one more time. "This is it," Ryan said. "We go in tomorrow night. Hit them fast, get the core, and get out. The collective will know we're coming," Zylara warned. "They'll have thralls waiting. Possibly worse." "Worse?" Tommy asked nervously. "The collective can manifest physically if it concentrates enough energy," Zylara explained. "We call them void princes. They're dangerous, capable of attacking your mind directly. If we encounter one, do not listen to it. Do not believe anything it shows you." Lisa adjusted her glasses. "So we're potentially going up against an evil space demon that can mess with our heads. Great. This is definitely not how I thought my week would go." Despite the tension, they all laughed. It was that or cry, really. David looked around at his team, these people who'd become his friends in just 2 weeks. Each of them had their own reasons for fighting. Ryan wanted vengeance for his fallen unit. Lisa wanted to protect the world that had always fascinated her. Tommy wanted to stop the digital manipulation that had caused so much pain. And David? He wanted to prove that ordinary people could do extraordinary things when they had to. That night, unable to sleep, David found Zylara standing by the window of his apartment, looking out at the city lights. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "I've led armies, fought wars across the stars, but I've never had so much riding on a single mission. If we fail tomorrow, Earth falls, and I will have failed another world." David moved to stand beside her. "You won't fail. We won't fail. You sound so certain." "I have to be," he said, "because if I let myself think about all the ways this could go wrong, I'll freeze up. So I'm choosing to believe we'll win. We've come too far to lose now." Zylara turned to him, and in her eyes he saw something shift. "The claiming," she said softly, "was supposed to be a simple bond, a protection protocol, but somewhere along the way it became something more." "I know," David said, because he did know. He felt it every time they fought together, every time they saved each other, every quiet moment they shared. After the ritual, The night was unusually quiet as they approached Nexus Tower. David had expected sirens, chaos, something to indicate that the city knew what was happening. But everything seemed normal. People walking dogs, couples out for late dinners, the world going about its business completely unaware that its fate was being decided. Tommy had done his job well. The security cameras looped harmless footage. The door locks opened at Ryan's touch. To anyone watching, the building was empty and secure, but David could feel it through his bond with Zylara, a wrongness that made his skin crawl. "They're here," Zylara whispered as they entered the lobby. "I can sense them." The lobby was all marble and glass, the kind of expensive minimalism that screamed wealth. Their footsteps echoed as they moved toward the elevator. Lisa had her modified equipment ready, devices that could detect collective energy. Ryan had weapons that could hurt thralls. Tommy stayed back in the van outside, monitoring everything through his laptop. The elevator ride up was the longest 60 seconds of David's life. He watched the numbers climb. 30th floor, 40th, 50th. With each floor, the pressure in his head increased. The bond between him and Zylara vibrated with tension. "Whatever happens up there," Ryan said, checking his weapon one last time, "we stick together. No heroes, no one runs off alone." The elevator dinged. 60th floor. The doors opened to reveal a nightmare. The entire floor was wrong. The walls seemed to pulse with dark energy. The air was thick, hard to breathe, and standing between them and the far end of the room where the core glowed with purple light were dozens of thralls. They didn't attack immediately. They just stood there, swaying slightly, their two dark eyes fixed on the group. It was somehow more terrifying than if they'd rushed forward. Then something moved in the shadows at the back of the room. Something that wasn't quite solid, that seemed to be made of the darkness itself. When it spoke, the voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The Empress and her pets, it said, and David recognized the layered, ancient tone. Avoid, Prince. How touching that you came all this way to die. We're not dying today, David said, surprised by how steady his voice was. The Void Prince laughed, and the sound made the windows rattle. So brave. So foolish. Do you really think you can fight us? We have been seeding this world for decades. We know your fears, your hatreds, your deepest shames. We are inside every cruel thought, every angry word. We are humanity's shadow, and we cannot be defeated. You're wrong. Xylara stepped forward, her body beginning to glow with power. Humanity is more than its worst impulses.